Andy, welcome back to Personal and Professional Best.
Yeah, thanks for having me back.
Yeah, this month's about relationships, which is without a question the most important part of my life, your life, all of our lives. And so today we decided that we would, for this month's program, we would take the greatest of all time in relationships, Jesus Christ, and we use his blueprint, serving others, sacrificing for others, and forgiving others. We've had Horst Schultze, a friend of yours, handle service. We've had Cheryl Fleetwood, a friend of mine, handle sacrifice. So you're closing it now with forgiveness.
Oh, great.
That's in your wheelhouse, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we're, as a church and as a pastor, we don't have a product, but if we had a product, it would probably be grace and forgiveness as modeled by Jesus, to your point, yeah.
Awesome. So let's get started. What is the definition of forgiveness?
Well, I think my personal definition for forgiveness, and I say personal, it's certainly not original with me. You have to understand the context of what forgiveness is. And forgiveness at its core is really canceling a debt. And the reason I love this approach is when a person understands, because everybody's tried to forgive. I mean, you've said it, or I've said it, you've heard it. I've tried to forgive. Well, anybody who's tried to forgive perhaps doesn't understand what forgiveness is. So the best way of thinking of forgiveness is in terms of a debt. For example, somebody has, if you're angry with somebody or you feel like I need to forgive somebody, it's because they've taken something from you. They've taken a first marriage. They've taken the opportunity to tuck your kids in bed at night. They've taken your reputation. They've taken a season of your life. And when anybody is hurt and is angry with somebody, something has been taken. And because most people can't put into words exactly what was taken, they never understand the debt that person owes them. So forgiveness just stays in this nebulous emotional realm. I'm angry and I'm trying to forgive. So forgiveness is identifying specifically what was taken and then deciding that person doesn't owe me anymore. I am canceling the debt. I'm not waiting to be paid back because in most cases, they can't pay us back anyway, right? I mean, how does an ex-spouse return all the damage that was done? How does a prodigal son or daughter return all the damage that was done? How does an ex-boss or employer return, a reputation or an idea that was stolen? It's impossible. So we live our lives carrying this ledger sheet that says, you owe me, and I'm going to be angry until you pay me back. And then I realize, well, Pat can't even pay me back. So what's my best option? My best option is to cancel or forgive. That's where the word comes from. Forgive that debt. So my definition, back to your question of what is forgiveness? Forgiveness is identifying what was taken and deciding to cancel the debt.
Wow, awesome. People travel with pain in life and they then give it away to others.
Yep.
And it's pain that's created in relationships because they haven't canceled the debt. They continue to travel with that obligation, if you will, and that pain, and they pour it into the lives of others, unfortunately.
Well, you bring up a great point because we've all heard people talk about people who have baggage. She has some baggage, he has some baggage. Well, that's the right analogy because essentially I'm carrying something I don't have any business carrying. It's slowing me down. And, we've traveled with our wives on some extensive trips and I don't want to blame our wives, but, if either person in the family is carrying extra luggage on a trip, it slows everybody down, right? I mean, we're all having to move that stuff around. So for a husband who's angry and carrying baggage, his wife, his kids, for a woman who's carrying it, her partner, her husband, her kids, everybody has to carry it. So the best thing we can do for ourselves, and to your point, the best thing we can do for the people we love the most is to unpack those bags and leave that stuff behind. It just weighs us down, it slows us down, and it complicates really all of our relationships.
Yeah, and we can't be our best in relationship with anyone else.
No.
When we're traveling with all of that distraction and all that clutter in our own life.
And the other reason is, and if you think about it this way, the person that hurt you, the person that maybe you despise, you might even say you hate them, until you forgive them, you have invited them into every single relationship in your life. You have invited, you can't stand them, but because you won't cancel the debt, they're following you around. And all this energy that we carry, all that anger and frustration, again, it just spills over into all the other relationships. So why in the world would we give someone that we really don't like, we really don't even want to see again? Why would we give them that much power over us? But again, because it all stays in the nebulous realm of emotion, sometimes it's hard to sort that out.
So I read a study, Johns Hopkins Hospital, that if you forgive, you're less likely to have a heart attack. Your blood pressure will be lower.
Wow.
You'll have less depression, less anxiety in your life. Essentially, it is tremendous for your health. And the opposite is also true. Those that they've studied that don't forgive, they are more likely to get cancer, heart attack, all these diseases. So if forgiveness is great, best for relationships, and it's also really good for your health, why are we having this conversation?
There's probably multiple answers to that question, but here's one. Because when I forgive, I feel like I'm giving the person that hurt me a gift. I feel like, wait a minute, you've stolen something from me, and now I'm giving something to you. We feel like by letting them off the hook, by forgiving them, by not forcing them to at least apologize or acknowledge what they've done. And that's one of the biggest problems with forgiveness is we want them, okay, they can't pay me back. They can't give me back those years, but at least you could acknowledge it, right? As long as we hold on to that, we feel like to forgive them is to give them a gift after they've taken something from us. Forgiveness is not intuitive. I love this Philip Yancey quote from one of his books. He said that God took a big risk by announcing forgiveness ahead of time. That God took it. In other words, when we think about Christianity, the message of Christianity is that while we were yet sinners, or before we had even sinned, Christ paid for our sin. And Philip Yancey says, God took a big risk by saying, you know what? I pronounce forgiveness before you have even sinned. He basically said, I'm going to cancel your debt before you've created it, and I'm going to give you the gift of forgiveness, and you'll never earn it. But that's the model, and it's the way forward emotionally, and to your point, it's the way forward in terms of our personal health.
What's interesting is that people have a hard time giving it to someone else, but if they're in a position where they need it, right? They will
ask for it.
Ask for it, plead for it, beg for it.
Please forgive me. Give me another chance.
That's right.
Let me continue to work here. You know, suddenly we can't understand why someone wouldn't forgive us, but we are so hesitant sometimes to, again, extend that gift.
So if you don't do it for the right reason, do it because it's good for your health to do it, right? But we should do it, of course, for the right reason. Is there anything that you don't think we should forgive for? Anything?
Yeah. Well, again, this is a really important differentiation. Forgiving you for abusing me is different than saying, now that I've forgiven you, let's enter back into a relationship. There are people that you should forgive and never see for the rest of your life because they're not healthy and they're not safe. So again, this is another reason people confuse forgiveness with something else. They think, well, if I'm forgiving them, then I have to restore the relationship. Absolutely not. And this comes at us in a different way as well. They'll say, well, Pat, haven't you forgiven me? And you're like, well, I have forgiven you. And they're like, well, why can't I come work for you again? Well, that's a separate issue. Well, why can't we reconnect? Why can't we hang out? Well, that's a separate issue. I have forgiven you. I've canceled your debt. You don't owe me anything. But canceling a debt and forgiving is different than restoring a relationship. Some relationships should be restored. Some relationships should never be restored because it's not a healthy or a safe relationship. But that doesn't mean you haven't forgiven. So everything should be forgiven, but everything shouldn't go back the way it was before necessarily, if that's an important distinction.
It is an important distinction. So is it possible to have a long-term meaningful relationship without forgiving?
No. Because now you can stay married, you can live under the same roof, you can continue to work together, but the currency of relationship is trust. The currency of relationship is not submission, it's not obedience, it's certainly not fear, it's not bartering, I will if you will and I won't if you won't. The currency of relationship is trust. And you can't fully give yourself to a relationship of trust because it goes both ways. If you're holding a debt over someone, you know this, if you ever loan money to a friend, it changes the nature of the relationship, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. That's why you should never loan money to a friend. You should just give them money. Just the moment you owe me, the relationship has changed. The dynamic of the relationship has changed. So in the same way, if you owe someone to forgive them or they owe you an apology, the relationship is not as healthy as it could be because there's a trust issue. So forgiveness or lack of forgiveness is a permanent impediment in a relationship because it diminishes trust.
You know, you said before we started that didn't we do this last year? And the answer is we did.
Yep.
But it's such an important topic that I think affects people every single day, whether it's at home or in the workplace, really everywhere they go, because this travels, that idea that we're going to cross paths with people and the relationship is going to get impacted at some point by pain, either intended or not, and we're going to need to forgive. And in fact, in our life, in our spiritual walk, I think it's the biggest example that we can set for others about why our faith is really the exception and is the best.
Yeah, and one of the reasons for that is some of the most remarkable people you've ever met, some of the most remarkable people we know, are the people who've been hurt the most, hurt the deepest, and yet you can't see it on their face. You don't see it in their countenance. You would never guess that was in their past because they have forgiven. They have forgiven. So yeah, those are the most remarkable people, not the people who have a wrinkle-free life. I mean, they're wonderful, but they're not necessarily remarkable. The remarkable people are the people who've been hurt deeply, have forgiven completely, and are able to move on with the health that comes with forgiveness.
And then God blesses them. Thank you so much again for being here today and for sharing wisdom with us on this most important topic so that all of us can be our very best in relationships.
Thanks, Pat.